Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Learn to Discern webinar series. This is Allegra Davis Hanna, and I'm joined today by Professor Rick.
Everyone. Welcome to the Learn to Discern webinar series. This is Allegra.
Sorry, we just create sound problems even when we don't have them. I'll let our guest speakers introduce themselves. How about that?
Hi, my name is Rick Sehgal. I'm an Associate Professor of Government at the Tarrant County College Trinity River campus.
And I'm Ms. Wilson-Mehrtens. I am the Department Chair of Social Sciences at Connect, and I teach history.
And I'm Allegra. I'm just here to ask questions and be the non-expert.
And what do you teach, Allegra?
Well, I teach English, so I'm good at asking questions. So my first question is, why do we even have primaries?
So this goes back to the progressive era, and this is one of the political reforms we were making around
What's the progressive era?
You know what? Thank you, Allegra. That is a good point. Not everyone teaches history. So the progressive era is at the turn of the 20th century, roughly 1890-ish to about 1915. And a lot of the reforms we were making are trying to make our political system more democratic. So things like direct election of senators starts happening during this time, and also the invention of the primary. So we have on the slide the full political science definition of what a primary is, but basically it's used to narrow down the candidates to the one candidate that's going to run per each party.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we're in primary season, and we're narrowing down the Democratic candidates to whoever is going to run against Donald Trump should he win the Republican primary.
He will.
Right, because there's not really a viable...
There's two people running against him, but they're not going to win.
Okay.
And the guy you're seeing here in this picture, that is Fighting Bob LaFollette. He's from Wisconsin. He's the person who suggested that we should have primaries. And he's one of our great progressives.
What did we do before that?
We had smoke-filled back rooms. So party bosses decided who was going to run for each party.
Okay. And some people think that's sort of still how it works.
Some people would say that, yes.
Okay.
But this is your chance to have your input into who runs for your party.
And the other thing it says here is that it gives me a say in the platform. Help me understand what that means.
So right now, we're looking at the Democratic field, right?
Yes.
If you're voting for Bernie Sanders, you're also voting for his platform.
Right.
If you vote for Bloomberg, you're voting for his platform over Bernie Sanders.
Sure.
So,
And I was going to add something to that. Whichever nominee each party picks, the party will still actually write out a platform. And some of that has to do with the candidate they pick, but sometimes it's also just what are the mainstream Democrat, Republican Party bullet points. And for example, when Donald Trump won in 2016, his ideals did not line up with the Republican platform in 2016. Now they might, more so. So if Bernie Sanders does get the nomination in 2020, a lot of his viewpoints probably won't match up with the platform of the Democrat Party.
And even if he doesn't get the nomination, some of his ideas that made him popular might become part of the platform.
Right.
they could, yes.
Okay. So even if I vote for a person who doesn't win, I'm still indicating I'm in favor of their policies.
Yes.
And if enough people are... Okay.
And one more thing I want to point out here. This also gives lesser-known candidates a chance to win an election.
Mm-hmm.
So the examples that kind of come to mind pretty quickly would be Bill Clinton. I know now he's very famous, but when he was running in the early 90s, he wasn't that well known.
Barack Obama.
And Barack Obama was my other one. Thank you for stealing my thunder, Rick.
Definitely not Donald Trump, since he was well known.
Yeah.
Which it works
He
both
was in a
ways.
Home Alone movie, I heard.
Home Alone 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I know him from. So, if anybody watches the news, they've heard the word caucus many, many, many times in the past month or so. Both of them serve the same end purpose, right? Which is to determine a state's choice in the primary. What's the difference?
Let me make a kind of a connection here. So before we moved to the system of the caucus or the primary, Misty mentioned the smoke-filled rooms. Caucuses are kind of like that in some ways. So the caucus system is well known because Iowa is the first state in the primary season to actually have an election.
Mm-hmm.
And Iowa does a caucus, and for the Democrat side, not for the Republican side anymore. And you see what happened in the Democrat side. They had quite a bit of issues with their.
Went smoothly.
Yeah, it went very smoothly. Not at all. But so the caucus system is old school, and it's actually it shows that less voters turn out because it can be pretty complex.
And takes a long time.
Takes a long time. You have to be a pretty dedicated voter and high informed voter to usually want to partake in that, because it's going to take several hours as opposed to 5 minutes voting in a ballot. So the caucus is now, there's only, as you can see, only a handful of states still do it, but Iowa gets the most news because they are first in the nation. So yeah, the way the caucus works is you usually go to a high school gym, some kind of like big room where you can put groups of people, and you go there maybe with a candidate in mind, maybe not. You can certainly join the undecided camp if you want to be there, but most people have a candidate that they're supporting. So you go there, you check in, you go to your little group of people. Let's say you're supporting Elizabeth Warren. You move to her group, and each state's different. Some states require a certain percentage of delegates or a certain percentage of people in their group. If you stay in Warren's, they're going to argue their points why you should vote for Warren. They're trying to get undecided people to come to their group. And at the end of all this, they count the people in each group. And that's how they award delegates. It's very strange, and it's very old school.
And if a group doesn't have enough people, then they get recruited by larger groups to come and join. And that's how Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders got all of the people they did, right? Because if only 2 people showed up for Andrew Yang, eventually those 2 people had to choose a different group to stand in.
The Yang gang was pretty small, despite the name. And a lot of, So now some places Yang probably got enough, but yes, you would have, if you didn't meet the threshold, I think it was 15% in Iowa, then you had to disband and go somewhere else. Or I guess leave. You can always leave.
Some people
stay.
Some people did award delegates to undecided.
Right.
Yeah.
What a system.
So let me ask you this. Why don't all the states go at the same time?
And that's an interesting question. There's been some movement for a nationwide primary. And the argument against that is the media wouldn't like it. And you have to think about that, because the media likes having this narrative of, now we get to talk about Nevada,
Right.
whatever it is. Or we can talk about South Carolina, Super Tuesday.
Right.
It goes on and on. So you got to think about that. And you got to think about how the media companies as well, like the money from advertising. You get advertising for a year instead of for 3 months.
Well, and candidates can also space out the money they spend if we do it this way.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about having some states go first is those voters in those states get essentially personal attention, right, from the candidates. And you can't do that for all 50 states.
Right, but think of it as that we do it in the general election. It's all at one time. And you go to certain states that arguably are more important, the Electoral College, like Florida and Pennsylvania. So you could have that in the primary, but it would be, if every vote is equal, you would go to the urban areas. You would go to New York City. You would go to Los Angeles. You wouldn't go to Iowa. You wouldn't go to West Texas. You know what I mean? And then that would be a problem for the rural areas, is you wouldn't get your voices heard.
Right, and I think that's the big criticism. So even if we're going to have some states go first, right, why are they not states that have a better match to our demographics?
Yeah.
I mean, Iowa is like 90% white.
But New Hampshire's even whiter.
Right.
So let's not...
And they go first.
Yeah.
And so it's not until we get to South Carolina and Nevada when there are huge numbers of primary voters that aren't of a particular demographic group voting in the primaries.
Yeah, no matter what, and going the caucus versus primary, no matter what system they use, when you have Iowa being first, if you're a person of color, you might have a harder time winning. And it's history shown. Obama is one of the exceptions. History shown is that if you're a white male candidate going into Iowa and New Hampshire, that you're probably going to do better than a person of color or a woman.
Well, that definitely happened this time, right?
Yeah,
and
arguably, but then Warren, we'll see what Warren and Klobuchar did okay in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're and it's strange, and it's just tradition. That's why it's.
But then they get all of the momentum.
Right.
that builds up from the first few states, and those first few states are not speaking for a representative sample. I mean, even if we were going to have a few states, I don't think it should be two primarily white states.
One so close together.
Right.
Like, there's just really no diversity even geographically there.
Are they close together geographically?
Well, I mean, if you're thinking about, like, versus Texas versus California versus Hawaii versus Alaska.
Okay, sure.
We should make Hawaii be first in the nation. It's fairly diverse. The media would like it because they can send their journalists to Hawaii.
Well, the journalists would like it.
The journalists.
The reporters would like. It would be much better than hanging out in Iowa in December.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is this? So this is a picture, right, of the primary candidates in the 2016 Republican primary. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's who these were?
Yes.
Okay. That seems like a lot of people, and mostly dudes. But that was
Carla Fiorina.
Yeah, she's
Let's
in
not
there.
forget Carla Fiorina.
She's in there.
but that's more than people talk about the Democratic primary having a lot of candidates. This seems like even more.
I don't know if you go back all the way to the beginning of this election cycle. I feel like it's about the same.
Okay.
Because you think about everybody we've eliminated so far. It's a lot of people.
Are you talking about the number of women in the... I mean, if you want to get to, like, the parties and gender and stuff, that's a whole different conversation.
No, we're just talking about the number that we start with versus to narrowing down.
2016 was weird, as is 2020. It's not normally 20 people. I mean, even in 2008, which was a pretty big election, you had Obama, Clinton, Edwards. Those were the major...
Mm-hmm.
Who am I forgetting?
I forgot about Edwards.
And then on the Republicans, you had McCain. You had... It was, you had a handful. God, who am I forgetting? Did Romney run in 2008? I think he did. I bet you Romney won.
Don't look at me. I teach English.
Yeah.
So the reason we put up this picture here is to show how big the field is when it starts.
Yeah.
And then it gets narrowed down.
Yeah.
And the other thing to think about is all of these candidates represent money spent in these primary elections.
Mm-hmm.
Even somebody like Jeb Bush, who didn't make it that far, still had to expend quite a bit of money for his campaign in the primary.
To be fair, he's not spending his own money, but yes.
Well, his campaign money,
Yes.
But he did spend a lot of, again, not his money, but I forget what that exact number was, but it was, and he dropped out after, I think, New Hampshire.
It was fairly early
on.
This is the 2016 list?
Yes.
Donald Trump is not here.
He's not, because he wasn't a candidate.
By the time that this image was made?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I guess my question is, so in 2016, right, the assumption before the primary season started was that Jeb Bush would come out the winner, right? That was what everybody thought would happen. But that is not what happened. He was eliminated pretty quickly.
Just like how they, and on the Democrat side, people thought that Clinton, like, who's Bernie Sanders? Like, who's this token person running on the Democrat side? But I think it was a kind of a interesting not futuristic, but a look into the future that she was going to have a hard time winning people over. She could barely defeat Bernie Sanders, who was very far to the left in 2016.
Still is. That's not a past tense.
And yes, but now he's actually, he hasn't changed, but maybe our ideals of what's left and right have changed. But yeah, Donald Trump came in, spent his own money, a lot of his own money, and was able to get a lot of earned media too.
When he has name recognition too.
Yeah, that too. But having rallies and the cameras would cover him free of charge.
Mm-hmm.
So something else to think about when we're looking at the candidates is who's going to be voting for these specific candidates. Because your average voter, low information voter, general election voter, maybe is not as familiar with all of these people. So you're the government teacher, Rick. Who votes in a primary?
So let me first say that primaries tend to have lower turnout. And it depends on the state. For example, in Texas, it's around 20-30% turnout. And that depends on the year, what kind of election we're talking about, how competitive it is. So you have lower turnout. The voters in primaries tend to be higher informed voters because the people that vote in primaries are older, more educated. They usually have a job. They usually have a family. They're just more aware of politics in general. The reason why they vote more so than others is because I've talked to my students about this, and they really say that this one's not the real one yet.
Right.
The real one's in November. I was like, well, think about your power in this election. You can choose the person that represents the party.
And if fewer people are voting, your vote kind of counts for more.
Right. And
the other argument you could make is if you're voting in a presidential election in Texas, right? In the actual election in November, it's almost a foregone conclusion that the Republican candidate is going to win the electoral votes in Texas, right?
Right.
But it's really anybody's grab for primary.
Right.
So in some ways, my vote in a primary presidential election might be more important or just as important as my vote in a presidential election.
Yeah, and if you don't just focus on the presidency, if you talk about governor, state senator, judges, sometimes there is no opponent in the general election. So the election is the primary.
Mm-hmm.
In Tarrant County, we have a lot of judges, not as much as we used to, that would run unopposed in the general. So the primary would weed out the Republican Party, and you would actually pick the winner in the primary. So yeah, there's all sorts of reasons to vote in the primary, but again, for a lot of Americans, they don't see the value because they to them, it's not the real election.
Right, you're not actually voting to put anyone in an office.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So lower turnout, but again, let me finish this part. You tend to have more of the fringe vote, the left fringe and the right fringe. So yeah, you're gonna if you're voting in the primary, you're more politically aware, which to a lot of people means you've made up your mind, you're pretty sure about your sides, and you're really kind of dug in. So for the Democrats, that usually results in a more left candidate. For the Republicans, it usually results in a more right candidate. Further to the right, further to the left.
Right.
So that can affect the general. If you pick a candidate that's too conservative, too liberal, a lot of Democrats are worried that Bernie Sanders is too liberal for the general. Well, the Democrat primary voters tend to be more liberal than the Democrat general election voter. So that's something to consider too.
That's interesting.
Oh, so I've been getting a lot of mailers for this upcoming Texas District 12 election. This is
these are pictures of your actual mail that we're looking at?
Well, no, I found these.
Okay.
These are the same ones that everyone's getting in my neighborhood at least. District 12 is currently represented by Kay Granger, Republican. Her ad is on the right. And for the first time in quite a while, she has a primary opponent, Chris Putnam, and his ad is on the left. And his ads are very negative on her. He associates her with Nancy Pelosi and other socialism ideals.
But they're both Republican candidates.
Yes, and Kay Granger's
I don't think of Kay Granger as being
socialist. She's not.
In line with Nancy Pelosi.
She's not.
Or Joe Biden, and according to this picture.
Yes, and shadowy figures. His ads, so he's being funded by Empower Texans, which is a very powerful West Texas lobbyist group. And they are a super PAC that is spending a bunch of money trying to get her out of office because they see her as a career politician. And she's got a history of doing things that you can attack. The Panther Island Project is a big one. That's being seen as a failure for different reasons. Now, the president has backed Kay Granger. The president has endorsed her. But Chris Putnam, this is one example of a very heated primary where he is to the right of Granger, and he has a very good chance of winning.
He's to the right of Kay Granger.
He's to the right of Kay Granger. And this is no longer the Tea Party. This is just draining the swamp. This is an example of how the president has really kind of changed how you compete against a moderate establishment. And she's not, again, I don't think she's moderate either, but she is establishment. And he's taken her on as Washington as usual, and we need to get rid of the old, bring in the new. So this is happening everywhere. This is an example of a local primary.
Interesting.
No. Mike Bloomberg. $300 million, right? $300 million.
So what's different, right, is he's only spending his own money.
Right.
He's not accepting donations
I don't think so.
at all.
I don't think he is. I could be wrong about that, but
I couldn't. So I was previewing the notes, and I was like, let me see, right? And I went everywhere I could. There's nowhere I could find. Not that I was going to donate.
You want to give him money, don't you?
But I was just trying to see, is there any place that is accepting donations for Mike Bloomberg? No, he's paying for all of it himself. And some people see that as positive, right? That he's not accepting campaign contributions. He's investing his own money. he doesn't want to spend other people's money, but then other people argue he's buying an election, right? Because no one
can compete. No one
can compete with that. And if I were a person who couldn't spend my own money, I'd have to fundraise. So, I mean, it just depends on how you look at it, right? Different people have different viewpoints, but has this literally ever happened before that someone is self-financing?
So people think Trump did. He did not.
He did not.
He had a lot of money. Now, Bloomberg is super rich. If you want to compare richness, Bloomberg is super rich compared to Trump. Trump could not spend $300 million of his own money. He wouldn't, number two. I know, as far as history goes, Misty, I don't know if a candidate has ever...
Not that I can think of.
I mean, in the modern history.
Not on this level and not for that position. I mean, you can probably think of some lower level positions where people spent their own money, but nothing on the scale of what Mike Bloomberg is doing.
And certainly people, especially in local elections, when they get started, I've heard of people like taking out a credit card to buy their first set of mailers or whatever. But definitely nobody else has said, I'm not taking donations.
No, there is a whole group of people that do not accept PAC money.
Yes.
They fundraise through small donations only. But that's a little bit different even from what Bloomberg is doing.
Oh, this is totally different.
So Bloomberg, the reason I put this in the slides is because I was watching television last night and I just counted the number of Bloomberg ads I saw in about a 2-hour period.
Mm-hmm.
I saw 5. Just flipping through channels. 5.
And he's all over social media. He's you can't avoid him. I'll ask my students.
Can't avoid him.
No, you can't. And they say, YouTube videos, like they know about him more than any other Democratic candidate. And it's not because they're trying to find out about the Democratic candidates. It's just they see him everywhere. So, and I told them this is going to be a very interesting experiment because you've never had a person spend this much money focusing on just one day. He's focused on Super Tuesday.
Yes.
He thinks that's his national primary. He's like, this is my national primary.
I mean, he skipped several.
Yes.
He's not
on the ballot. He's not on the ballot.
And he wasn't on the ballot in New Hampshire.
It's actually kind of genius. He's not had to be on the debate stage. Now, tonight he will be. He's never had to be on the debate stage with these people. And he can just kind of write off Iowa. Well, look, I wasn't on the ballot.
And one of the big forces, right, in primaries is momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So if you peak too early, right, if you get momentum too early, like in right before Iowa or something, then it can trail off. And so he's trying to do the reverse, right? He's trying to skip some of the early and have big momentum on Super Tuesday,
well,
which is...
Look at some of the names we were following early on, like Cory Booker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was
you were following Cory Booker?
That was a big name, though, early on. He was on a lot of media.
Mm-hmm.
Not even in the race anymore.
I don't think he was in a lot of media. Him and even Kamala Harris did not get the media coverage that Bernie Sanders got, and
even Pete Buttigieg got more coverage, I think, than Cory Booker.
Because he's a unique candidate. And and Cory Booker, not that he's not unique, but, we've had a black president, right? And we've never had an openly gay president. I say openly because Misty will probably say
right.
Fillmore is
right.
the one.
And I mean
Buchanan, sorry.
And so just to clarify, in case we have students watching this who aren't familiar with the phrase Super Tuesday, because I realize we're all kind of nerds, right? Super Tuesday is when?
Well, Super Tuesday is March 3rd.
Okay.
March 3rd.
And Texas is included in Super Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, some states like Texas, early voting is started. Early voting started on Tuesday.
You probably have seen signs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super Tuesday, it changes every election cycle. Texas normally was not part of Super Tuesday. And now this is the earliest Texas, I think, has ever voted in the presidential primary.
But it's a day when it's not one or two states, it's a whole bunch of states doing a primary.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to be the most revealing.
Right. And I think it's around 62% of delegates will be awarded after Super Tuesday. So if Bloomberg does well, he may not have to worry about Iowa. Certainly Iowa, New Hampshire, and everything else is an afterthought. He will be very set up for the rest of the race because it's going to be mostly done. 2/3 of it will be done.
Interesting.
By March 3rd, yeah. So if you don't have momentum upon Super Tuesday, you're probably going to be dropping out.
And people are already dropping out, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll have a couple more drop out after South Carolina in a couple weeks.
So after the primary...
So one of the arguments made about primaries is that it does damage within the party.
I feel like that's happening.
So look at Obama and Clinton, right?
Yeah.
They have to go after each other in the primary.
Yes.
But then after the primary, we need a united Democratic force on election day,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So you got to find a way to like heal those wounds,
Mhm.
bring people back together. And for Obama, that means making Clinton Secretary of State, right?
Right.
But with the group we have this year, it's so large.
It always looks bad. It always, even with President Trump, he made fun of Ted Cruz's wife, and he said that his father was the Zodiac killer. Right? He said
I forgot about that.
Yeah, he said, and he.
I thought Ted Cruz was the Zodiac killer.
No, I think it's his dad.
Oh.
Ted Cruz is too young to be the Zodiac. Come on, Allegra. Let's state facts here.
To be clear, Ted Cruz's dad also not the Zodiac killer.
Correct. Well, do we know? No. Yeah, correct.
Right.
As far as we know.
We're still doing an educational
Right.
webinar.
Right.
Okay.
This is the president we're talking about, right? So the president says these things like, how could Ted Cruz ever support this man, right? Or
Right.
Lindsey Graham,
Right.
Marco Rubio, Jeb
Right.
Bush, John McCain.
Low energy Jeb.
Low energy Jeb, yeah, little Marco. So, but all these people support him now. And either that's through just wanting to grease the wheels, or because he earned your trust or earned your apology. I don't know, earned your apology, but I doubt that's what happened, but you never know. But yeah, with Obama and Clinton.
I mean, Obama and Clinton, we don't think about because it's kind of farther back, but they were pretty vicious in the primaries.
She made it very clear that you don't want him answering the phone at 3 a.m., right? Remember that one?
Mhm.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And then they got a working relationship because they had to repair the party. He wanted her voters to vote for him, or her supporters to vote for him. And I feel like that's happening now, right? Like, we have party front runners who, if you are like a Pete Buttigieg or an Andrew Yang, to get to the top of the pack or to move up, you have to attack the big dogs. And I feel like they're all taking bites out of each other, that when it comes time for the general election, are people still going to remember those criticisms against the candidates?
Well, in the last election, there was that criticism of Bernie Sanders, right? That he didn't get on board and support Clinton the way that he should have, the way that you're expected to if you don't win.
And they still don't like each other, Clinton and Sanders. I mean, she made that very clear.
Yeah, she just recently said nobody likes him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a little out of order.
We did.
Because Allegra asked questions.
That's
early.
what you brought me here for. But I do have another question. How do delegates work? Is that coming up later? Did I just skip that? You don't have to give us all of it, but
that is so complicated.
It's different in different parties.
Different parties have it handled differently. Every state does it differently. Like, Iowa had some weird mix of the popular vote and the delegate vote.
Mm-hmm.
It is so ridiculously complicated. The bottom line is each party requires a candidate to get a certain number of delegates to outright win the nomination.
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Trump's going to do that because he has no real competition.
Right.
But the Democrats that's going to be a serious issue. If one candidate does not get, I forget the number, 1,600 delegates by the end of this primary season, you're going to have a brokered convention.
Right, and then it's kind of a jump ball at the convention.
It's a smoke-filled room.
Well,
again.
no, it turns into the same thing as the caucus, right?
Right.
We're all on the floor arguing, like, support my person, support my person.
But in history, when we've had brokered conventions, what you end up with is, okay, you run, but these are the things I want from my home district. So it ends up being a horse trade almost.
Or somebody saying, like, okay, you can have the nomination, you've got to make me vice president, or you've got to put me in a good cabinet seat, and then I'll back out.
Yeah.
So it's really the candidates then in a back room, or their
party bosses,
representatives saying, okay, I'll back out, but you have to give me something of real value.
Right.
And that way they decide who gets nominated. I mostly know that from watching the show The West Wing. So
it's not. I mean, that's pretty factual. There are worse sources to use.
Again, we're a little bit out of order here.
That's okay. This is an interesting chart. So tell me why more people used to vote in the primaries. That's what this is showing us, right?
Oh, it shows the voting age population. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is total turnout. You're right.
So look at when it was high voting. That's right in the middle of the Civil Rights era, during the middle of Vietnam. People had more skin in the game. There was more reasons to be involved. And as we've become more apathetic, it's gone down a little bit. As we see kind of spikes and peaks here, you have issues that come up kind of one-off issues sometimes that encourage people to go vote.
Mm-hmm.
But generally,
Or
like,
in, I guess, in 1974, encouraged no one to vote in the Republican primary.
yeah, that was a rough year.
But, I mean, the high point on this chart is just over 20%. That's not very high.
No, and that means like 20% of the people are picking your candidate for you.
Now it's combined, so you're talking more, like 30%. But yeah, right. This is you combine the two to get the total turnout.
Well, and as
Yeah.
Rick was saying, if we
Yeah.
were going to have an age representation of these candidates, it's going to skew older,
Much older. Yeah.
more radicalized either way,
Yeah.
left or right, generally more educated, right?
Yes, much more. People that it's usually people that have a job that are focused on certain issues, the economy, immigration, whatever that issue may be, and they're motivated.
So talk to us about the convention.
Oh, the party conventions. Each party at the end of the primary season, usually was it July, June, July. There should be a very clear winner of each primary. Again, with the Republicans, it's going to be clearly Donald Trump. But in 2016, when you had two primaries that were competitive, for the Democrats, it wasn't really clear towards the end.
Mhm.
I mean, Sanders always kind of had a chance, but Clinton put it away kind of late. And each party uses their convention to kind of motivate the base, and it's kind of a as far as it's the formal nominating process.
Mhm.
We hereby nominate Hillary Clinton to be the 2016 candidate for the Democrats. We hereby nominate Donald Trump, etc.
Also, a little bit of a pep rally.
Oh, definitely. It can be used also to show your VP off. Like some people,
Mhm.
sometimes they announce the VP at the convention.
Mm-hmm.
The VP gets a prime speaking spot. Usually have, Barack Obama got a start at the 2004 convention for John Kerry. He was a fresh senator, a junior senator, and he wowed everybody with his speech.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of kickstarted him off to his eventual 2008 campaign. So it's a showcase of your party, of your ideas, of your celebrities. Sometimes you bring celebrities to get the, like Missy said, it's a pep rally. But it can also just be a very boring, they want it to be, a very formal nominating process.
So usually the boring stuff happens during the day,
Yeah.
right? And the exciting speeches happen during prime time when people would be watching TV.
Although I will say, it is boring, but I love hearing, we, the great state of Texas, award our, 400 delegates to, and we know who it is, but
Right.
I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, most people are not,
Most people are
not
not.
going to.
No,
I understand.
that doesn't
That's why I'm
sound.
here. Yes.
How does a person become a delegate?
Oh, well, depends on the state and the party. Usually, it's almost like the electoral college in a way, where the party kind of leaders pick you to be a delegate. You may be a friend of the party, maybe you supported a candidate for the party, for one of the parties. So if you are interested in politics, you can find a way to become a delegate, and it just depends on each community's party and the party leadership there.
And
There's no voting process.
anytime I see video from conventions, it seems like everyone there is wearing like a really ostentatious hat. Is that an official part of the convention process, or is
Wearing
that
a ostentatious hat.
yeah, or a jaunty cap? Right? They all have hats on. And they all
I never noticed the hats, but I noticed the brooches.
and
ladies wear
they
these
just have
gigantic brooches.
buttons, and there's a lot of hats.
These people have big personalities, and there's no rule that says you have to wear a hat or a brooch.
Okay.
That you know of.
But
That I
it's an
know of.
unspoken. I mean, you've never been a delegate, so you don't know.
How do you know that? I've never been. Yeah.
You have
Way to hit me hard. One day.
So it's not just a presidential primary that we can vote in starting yesterday. What else are we voting for?
Let me go back a little bit here. So each state, I keep saying this, each state does differently. In Texas, if you decide to vote in the primary, when you show up to the voting station, you will be asked, do you want a Republican or a Democrat ballot? And you pick one, right? This does not label you as a Republican or a Democrat, nor do you have to be registered as a Democrat or Republican. But this ensures that you only vote in one or the other.
Not both.
Not both. And once you vote and you leave, again, you can vote in the general however you want. You can switch parties if you want.
So I could theoretically switch parties and vote for the person I think is the weakest so that my party has a better chance of beating
And there's
them.
always like a conspiracy theory, right? That's what people are going to do. So like there's the conspiracy theory that Republicans are all going to vote in the Democratic primary and push forward a nominee that's not viable, and then
But only certain states are that way, right? That
Yes.
have the, you go in and tell them.
Yeah, some states you have to be registered with that party to vote in their primary. Some states now Texas we call it a hybrid format, so you're able to vote in either or without having to be registered. Some states if you vote in the Republican primary, like in Texas, you can only vote in the Republican runoff if there's a runoff, which is kind of in the weeds. But that's also one of the rules. I think there's some truth to that though. I think some people do vote for the Republicans. Donald Trump is going to win Texas in the primary, so why wouldn't you vote for the weakest Democrat candidate, switch parties, right? I think that is something that does happen.
I mean, because there's a chance that you're voting somebody into the candidacy and eventually the office who is a not person that you don't support. I mean, you are still casting a vote in favor of that person, therefore endorsing and helping to push forward that candidate.
That's going to lose in their mind.
Regardless of the strategy behind it.
But the point is, they might not lose, and you're helping to support them.
Yes.
So,
these people don't think like that.
I'm just saying it's not a great strategy.
Well, to your credit, Barack Obama, people voted for him in 2008. Republicans did in Texas, thinking that he was the weaker candidate. And, they were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that does backfire. But, so once you pick your party, you go to your ballot box and you're, of course, going to vote for president. But also this year, you'll be voting for Senate, U.S. Senate. John Cornyn is up for re-election. You'll be voting for several judges. You'll be voting for your U.S. House member, Kay Granger, for a lot of our listeners probably.
Viewers. It's a webinar.
It's a webinar.
They just can't see
They
you.
might be hearing us, though. With their eyes closed.
Sure.
So how long do I have to early vote, Rick?
You have until next Friday, Misty. February 28th. You have...
Can I get registered right now and still vote?
No. 30 days before the election day. So
if you're not registered by now, you've missed early voting for the primaries.
But
actually primary voting.
You should still register to vote so that
you can vote in the general.
In November.
Sure.
Register at your current address.
Right.
That's important.
Where else would you register? Your old address?
No, I'm just saying, like, if you were registered at your old address,
you need to move it.
You need to. It doesn't just change when you change your driver's license address. You have to change your voter registration as well, because it changes who you're voting for. You're in a different district, possibly.
And in Texas, we can't register online, right?
That is correct.
You can change your voter registration address online if you are in the same county. That's the only thing you can do online.
Yeah. They make it hard.
And so when I show up to vote in the primary, I'm going to have to pick a line, right? Republican or Democrat.
Depends on the polling station.
I guess that's just always where they're like, stand over here if you're this, stand over here if you're that.
We have early voting on the Trinity River campus, actually, so if you live nearby, you can come here. But yeah, for this campus, it's just, I don't think they have lines. They just have, you go to the little desk and you give them your ID card or your other identification, and they ask you, and they'll give you the access code for that specific party.
And I know if you're in like Johnson County where they still do paper ballots, they just give you the paper ballot of whichever one you're doing.
I think everybody's primary's on paper ballots.
Oh, they're even...
Oh.
No, so in each county's different. Each state's every county's different.
I live in Denton County, so.
Yeah. Oh.
We
Full
have
disclosure.
a student question here.
So Jackie's asking, is Tarrant approved for countywide polling place effective for this election?
That is a fantastic question. Early voting, yes. I am not aware, Jackie, of election day. They tried it out in the last election, in the special constitutional election in September. And I think it went well, but that's got a very low turnout. So I don't know, to answer your question, if Tarrant County is
what that means is in early voting, you can go to any polling place in your county.
Correct.
And you will get your correct ballot. But we don't know about election day. If election day, you have to go to your actual precinct place, which would be like an elementary school in your own neighborhood, usually, as opposed to...
Okay, I have a update here.
He's Googled it.
Tarrant County registered voters on election day can vote at any vote center from 7 to 7. So
Okay, so Tarrant County, you can vote at any polling place in the county, you do not have to. Thank you, Jackie, for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So you don't have to go to your specific precinct. You can vote anywhere in the county.
I will say
Right.
that we highly recommend early voting because it'll save you some time.
Oh yeah, it's so there's no lines here ever. They're waiting for you. They're twiddling their thumbs, waiting for people to come and vote here.
Yes, and always on election day, even in primaries, there will be more turnout on that last day. I don't know if you notice, people are inclined to procrastination. So even if it's not a super long line, there will be more people there. Yeah.
All right, we have another student question here. So, has the attempted impeachment of President Trump helped or hurt his potential re-election campaign?
To clarify, it was an impeachment. It was a completed impeachment, right?
He was impeached.
Yes.
I'm
He
just
was not-
reading the question.
He was not removed, but yeah, he was impeached. It does not hurt his primary election,
Right.
which is what so certainly he's going to win the primary. I don't know. I don't think it's they've done some polling, and that's all we can really use is polling data.
And we know
And-
how accurate that is.
Well, I think no, actually, it is pretty accurate. I mean, I think the 2016 election was off by a little bit, but the 2018 was actually pretty accurate. They got that right for the most part. I mean, polls, that's all we have, or
Mhm.
polls to predict. So has it hurt his re-election chances? I mean, I think a lot of people have already made up their minds about him. Either you support him or you
Mhm,
don't.
mhm.
And I don't know if it really made anybody's like, well, now I'm going to definitely vote for him or not because of this. I don't think that did anything. But
Do you think it also might depend on how effectively his opponent is able to use that as a strategy?
I think we've already forgotten about it. I think impeachments is history, and I think it's on to the next either controversy or success for him, however you want to look at it. But I think, and he's not going to bring it up, the president. So he's been exonerated, right?
That is the word he has used.
Acquitted. I'm sorry. Oh, the legal term is acquitted. He was acquitted. And now it may hurt the senators up for re-election. What's her name in Maine? Susan Collins.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think you may have some collateral damage.
I think that's probably it will have a bigger impact on not just senators, but also the people in the House of Representatives who took part in that
Right.
impeachment process, but also the senators who voted in the trial. I think if people were really invested in watching that, then they might have stronger opinions, one way or the other, about their senators based on how they voted. And a lot of people said the reason that Mitt Romney could dissent from his party is because he didn't have to worry about
No.
his constituents not reelecting him on this basis,
Right.
because he is a little bit of a special constituency.
Yeah, and Utah is not really too happy with the president.
Mhm.
They're a Republican state, and they'll vote for him in 2020, presumably. But I think they are not his kind of people, the people of Utah, and they don't really approve of his politics.
Do you have any other student questions? All right, so I'm sure students want to know two things: what's coming up next with us,
Mm-hmm.
and then how they get credit for watching this. Probably more the second one. Before we talk about that, let's talk about what's coming up next.
So on March 4th, we will have a webinar about the census and the state of Texas. And so this is really about how the nationwide census, we're going to have some history and historical information, but also some really local information and some explanation about how the census impacts you, me, even Tarrant County College, right? And on March 25th, our webinar is about first-time voters and how they might impact the 2020 election and how they've impacted elections in the past. On April 8th, by that point, we will have gone through Super Tuesday and we will have gone through several more primaries, so we will hopefully have fewer candidates in the primary, and we can talk about the remaining candidates, whoever they are, on April 8th, and we can get into that in the webinar. And then, of course, on April 29th.
Oh, we're going to talk about One Nation. So how united or divided are we really? Because we have this perception that we are all very divided,
Mm-hmm,
but there's a lot of issues that we have over 75% agreement on.
mm-hmm,
It's just that nobody talks about those things.
yes. Or they talk about them in divisive ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all about how you frame the conversation, right?
So, again, we want to encourage you, if you're eligible to vote, to be sure that you're registered to vote. And if you are not eligible to vote, then there are lots of ways that you can help. You can drive people to the polls and all kinds of other things, and we'll talk about that as well. So the thing you really want to know is how you get credit for attending this webinar. You have until Friday at whatever time this is.
It's usually about 5 o'clock when this gets taken down.
So you have about 48 hours to finish watching the video, which you have done. Congratulations, and complete this survey. The survey is linked right underneath the YouTube video. The link will appear within the next hour. It's not automatic, but it will be there in about the next hour. And you fill out the survey. The survey lets us know how we can improve the webinars, what topics you're interested in. It's also going to ask you a few questions to make sure that you attended, paid attention, and got some information. That's how you get the credit. Be sure to include your name and your instructors' names so that we can send that information to them.
And your section number of your course is very, very, very helpful. So English 1301, 86, something, something.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, it's up to your instructors whether they give you credit, extra credit, and or when they put the credit in the grade
some
book.
Instructors are not going to put that in until the end.
I put it in at the very end, yes. Because I'm evil, or I don't want, I want you to see your real grade while the course is happening, not because I'm evil. All right, if you have feedback for us, things you'd like us to discuss, or questions that we need to answer, you're welcome to put those on that question. Otherwise, on that survey. Otherwise, we will see you on March 4th. Thank you for joining us. Thank you,
Rick.
Thank you, Rick, for being our guest star.
I enjoyed it.